Launching only 3 months after the first game, FNAF 2 was eager to prove itself bigger and better, boasting more enemies, a bigger map, and of course, much more lore. So without further ado, let's get into it. As in the previous game, we learned from a payslip at the end of our 5th night. The game actually occurs with Night 5 landing on the 12th of November 1987. This gives us our first major clue in the game that something is not as it seems, as the phone call we hear on Night 1 welcomes you to your summer job. Now, bearing in mind that this game was made in America and features American voice actors, it is reasonable to assume at this point that the pizzeria in question within the game is in the Northern Hemisphere. And as the payslip is mentioned to be in November, this is definitely not the summer.
Hello and welcome to your new summer job at the new and improved Freddy Fazbear's Pizza.
So the tapes are clearly being pre-recorded as they were in FNAF 1, and are also narrated by the phone guy, implying that this indeed does take place before FNAF 1, as he is clearly still alive. And so the lore that we can gather from these recorded tapes appears to take place a good 5 or 6 months before the actual gameplay events. Another interesting point to note is that the bite of 87 has yet to occur by the time these recordings were made, as we are clearly told that the suits are allowed to walk around in the daytime, which is something that the bite would later prohibit.
They even let them walk around during the day. Isn't that neat?
The phone guy would inform us of an older Freddy site which was much more run down, which apparently still exists but has such a bad reputation to the public, which means that now the new and improved facility is opening and has been staffed by anti-criminal robots, so basically animatronics with criminal detection software, which would imply something occurred in the old site involving criminal activity.
Now, I want you to forget anything you may have heard about the old location, you know. Some people still have a somewhat negative impression of the company. That old restaurant was kind of left to rot for quite a while, but I want to reassure you, Fazbear Entertainment is committed to family fun and above all, safety. They've spent a small fortune on these new animatronics. Facial recognition, advanced mobility, they even let them walk around during the day. Isn't that neat? But most importantly, they're all tied into some kind of criminal database so they can detect a predator a mile away.
The fact that the suits are now allowed to walk during the day implies that previously they were not allowed to, but as this appears to predate the bite of 87, it seems odd that there must be a second incident that we are unaware of which has caused such a ban on animatronics being allowed to roam. One potential lead we have on this case, based on the available evidence at this point, appears to be the fact that if the prior establishment was indeed the one where the missing children's murders occurred, then it would stand to reason that the suits were banned from roaming due to the sanitation threats. It is also curious that at this point in the timeline there also does appear to be reasonable evidence to suggest that people are already being stuffed into animatronic suits.
You see, there may be a minor glitch in the system, something about robots think he was an endoskeleton without his costume on and wanting to stuff you into a suit.
These rumours appear strange until we consider the fact that the Night 2 tapes reveal that the older, now withered animatronics have been retired and are currently in a back room being dissected, cleaned and retrofitted with the new upgraded tech. The trailer for the game does give a striking comparison between the old and new suits, the old suits being noted as forgotten, dismantled and deactivated, while the new are redesigned, reactivated and malfunctioning. Note the fact that they are malfunctioning, as we will soon learn that this may not entirely be the case, based on the idea that the original withered suits are indeed the same suits based on the sanitation threat which have been possessed by the bodies that are currently within them, it stands to reason that these suits may indeed be the ones that have attempted to possibly stuff people into other suits.
By now, I'm sure you've noticed the older models sitting in the back room. Those are from the previous location. We just use them for parts now. The idea at first was to repair them. They even started retrofitting them with some of the newer technology. The thing was just so ugly, you know? And the smell.
Now, it stands to reason that if the missing kids' bodies were indeed put into these older suits, which gives us the smell that Fungi mentions, then it would stand to reason that the company also, while dissecting the suits for retrofitting, would have found the bodies. As the bodies are reportedly never found, though, it can therefore imply that the company most likely covered this up. Now, this does imply that possibly there could have been individuals who were aware of these bodies and their covering up, and therefore rumours could have spread within the company itself, which would lead people to believe the idea that people were in fact being stuffed into the suits, and some more superstitious individuals seeing this, plus knowing about the condition that the suits were in and the smell coming from them, would have led to the precaution being put in place using the Freddy head to disguise yourself from the animatronics that roam the halls at night. So therefore we have two potential answers as to why the suit stuffing rumours may have already been in circulation at this point. Now, we learn about the first night guard at this newly opened Freddy's location, who, after finishing his first week on the night shift, was moved to day shift as the animatronics would attempt to enter his office.
You're only the second guard to work at that location. The first guy finished his week but complained about conditions. We switched him over to the day shift. So, hey, lucky you, right? Mainly he expressed concern that certain characters seemed to move around at night and even attempted to get into his office. Now, from what we know, that should be impossible. That restaurant should be the safest place on Earth. So while our engineers don't really have an explanation for this, the working theory is that the robots were never given a proper night mode. So when it gets quiet, they think they're in the wrong room. So then they go try to find where the people are, and in this case, that's your office.
The fact that it states certain animatronics attempt to make it into the office does seem to point at particular individuals, which in this case would most likely be the toy animatronics, as the originals are clearly noted to be deactivated. However, there is evidence that points to the fact that it is in fact the puppet being mentioned here, as it is the puppet which is immediately mentioned afterwards and given details on how to stop it.
So our temporary solution is this. There's a music box over by the prize counter, and it's rigged to be wound up remotely. So just every once in a while, switch over to the prize counter video feed and wind it up for a few seconds. It doesn't seem to affect all of the animatronics, but it does affect one of them.
An interesting point here is also the fact that the company sees the newly designed criminal detection robots approaching the security office as merely a technical issue, when there is a possible solution staring them right in the face. The suits are not malfunctioning. They are working fine and doing their job. They detected that the guard himself was trouble. So, on the second day of the second guard's week, we have an incident occur in the establishment. This clearly does not appear to be, however, the original Missing Shells incident being portrayed. We see 5 kids portrayed in the Save Them minigame scattered across the FNAF 2 site as the puppet leads Freddy through the halls. Notably, we do see the withered animatronics in their withered state are in the parts and service room in this minigame, and as we see in the Give Gifts minigame, the suits appear to be intact when the bodies of the missing children are placed within them by the puppet. Another glaring piece of evidence within the Save Them minigame does appear to be the fact that Golden Freddy can at times appear within the minigame, observing Freddy being led by the puppet, which kind of implies that Golden Freddy was one of the original five and therefore is already dead. So the missing children predates these murders, and we do see this in the Give Life minigame as for a split second the last frame of the game will show fifth dead child followed by the jump scare face of Golden Freddy. Now I'm going to weigh in on a debate that raged at the time of this game's release among the fandom, which was the Purple Man versus Pink Man debate. Now, anyone who knows FNAF knows Scott Coffin is a man of details, and so the fact that in this game he specifically made two separate sprites for what we believe to be the killer within these minigames does tell us that there must be a specific reason that he did this. So as we see in these minigames, the Foxy Go minigame features the Pink Man, yet in Save Them we see a purple man who clearly appears to have a badge. My theory is this: the 5 kids in the Foxy minigame are the original 5 missing murdered children. The man in the Save Them minigame is not the same man that we see in that Foxy minigame, but that does not mean that he is not potentially a killer. The outfit of the purple man in this game would imply that he is a guard, and as this is presumably still during the daytime, this would make this the first night guard who moved to day shift. And so my theory on this sprite discussion would be that the purple man may not actually be the killer in this game, and if he is, then it's a copycat killing of the original Pink Man. Now my reasoning behind why the purple man here may not actually be the killer stems from the idea that we don't actually see direct evidence that he is responsible for the killings. What we do see him do is attack the player's Freddy character, which in context, if you think about it, the killer of the original murders was dressed in a mascot costume, and presumably if it was the same killer the second time around, then they would also be wearing a mascot costume. So this guard is attempting to stop the killer by attacking the Freddy character, and so the blue screen upon him contacting your character gives us the words "you can't." Well, it's never really been elaborated on what "you can't" actually means. It could be you can't save them if he is the killer, but it could also be you can't as in you can't do this if he is trying to stop the killer. Another interesting side note is also the fact of we don't actually have any, at this point, idea of what the motive is for these repeated murders of children within the Freddy's establishment, but the fact that the trailer plays the song London Bridge is Falling Down gives us a slight indication that, based on the lore around that nursery rhyme, the London Bridge is believed to have been built on blood sacrifice of children, I believe. So it's possible that there may be some sort of ritualistic method to these killings, but again, there is no concrete evidence to support that outside of that one song in the trailer. So, continuing on with our progression of the timeline, by the third day, it is apparent that there are enough rumours circulating that by the time of the night guard's third night, we have the company actively trying to quell rumours, Fog Guy himself alerting us of them and trying to dismiss these rumours as attempts to get rich and famous.
Oh hey, before I go, I wanted to ease your mind about any rumors you might have heard lately. You know how these local stories come and go and seldom mean anything. I can personally assure you that whatever is going on out there, however tragic it may be, has nothing to do with our establishment. It's just all rumor and speculation, people trying to make a buck, you know. Our guard during the day has reported nothing unusual, and he's on watch from opening till close.
So the day guard is noted to have seen nothing out of the ordinary happening, Yet based on the evidence we have available from the minigame, this just does not seem to be the case at all, as there was multiple bodies, a lot of blood, and we clearly see him walking around in the facility, as well as the "you can't" in relation to the Freddy animatronic, or possibly the real killer. And so we're led to believe that the company is once again trying to cover up potential incidents here. And this does seem to be a potential logical step for the company in this part of the timeline, as we clearly have the previous missing shells incident, which completely ruined the company's reputation to the point where they had to completely rebuild a new facility with new animatronics. So it stands to reason that 2 weeks into opening your brand new state-of-the-art pizzeria with criminal detection technology, that if said pizzeria then suddenly had a repeat murder spree happen within it, it would seriously tarnish the reputation of the company. On the 4th day of the second guards week, we find that the site is now closed for investigation, while the company continues to deny any involvement or responsibility of the incident that has occurred. The suits are noted to now be acting in an unusual manner towards the staff, almost aggressively. This would make sense if they have tried to cover up the incident, as now angered spirits will now be turning on the company staff for their involvement in covering up their deaths.
Okay, so just to update you, there's been somewhat of an investigation going on. We may end up having to close for a few days. I want to emphasize, though, that it's really just a precaution. Fazbear Entertainment denies any wrongdoing. These things happen sometimes. It'll all get sorted out in a few days. Just keep an eye on things, and I'll keep you posted. Just as a side note, though, try to avoid eye contact with any of the animatronics side if you can. Someone may have tampered with their facial recognition systems. We're not sure. But the characters have been acting very unusual, almost aggressive toward the staff. They interact with the kids just fine, but when they encounter an adult, they just stare.
As we move on to the 5th day, it has now been seen that the site has gone into a full lockdown, and it is also noted specifically that no previous employees of the company are allowed access to the site.
Hey, keep a close eye on things tonight, okay? From what I understand, the building is on lockdown. No one is allowed in or out, especially concerning any previous employees. When we get it all sorted out, we may move you to the day shift. The position just became available. We don't have a replacement for your shift yet, but we're working on it. We're going to try to contact the original restaurant owner. I think the name of the place was Fredbear's Family Diner or something like that. It was closed for years, though. I doubt we'll be able to track anybody down.
So from this phone call, we get the impression that based on the way phone guy emphasises the words former employee, and the fact that the day shift has now become available, implies that the day guard has likely been arrested in connection with the incident. We see that it has now been 2 days the site has been under investigation, since he said nothing occurred, yet 5 murders occurred right under his nose, so it is possible the police are using that as a point of interest. We also learn that the company has been seeking the original owner of Fredbear's Family Diner, although why they are no longer around and why they are now a person of interest is not clearly elaborated on. And to make matters even more confusing, the second night guard now oddly returns for a 6th night, despite the fact that it has clearly been noted over the past few days that the site is now in lockdown, and therefore he should not be there.
Hello, what on earth are you doing there? Didn't you get the memo? The place is closed down, at least for a while. Someone used one of the suits. We had a spare in the back, a yellow one. Someone used it. Now none of them are acting right. Listen, just finish your shift. It's safer than trying to leave in the middle of the night. We have one more event scheduled for tomorrow, a birthday. You'll be on day shift. Wear your uniform. Stay close to the animatronics and make sure they don't hurt anyone, okay? For now, just make it through the night.
phone guy is notably alarmed at the presence of the guard and unwittingly reveals something interesting to us. You could see the guard was there. The company have remote access to the security cameras in some capacity, which would mean they potentially have video footage of the night of the killings. And the FNAF 1 news clippings state a culprit was caught using CCTV. We never really get an answer to why the guard returned this night, as there are no tapes after this. We do know, however, that the guard was moved to days and would be overseeing an event the next day, which was a birthday party. Although the fact that this facility is now closed would imply that there are more than one facility operating at this time. It's also notable at this point that as Jeremy is not the ones these tapes are actually intended for, they are occurring months before Jeremy's actual shift, then it makes sense that Jeremy is in fact not the bite victim as people always seem to believe that he is. We do also get confirmation that a yellow suit was indeed used during this incident, which furthers my belief that the guard in some capacity was potentially trying to stop whoever was causing the event by attacking the Freddy animatronic, possibly mistaking him for the killer. So this is my theorising on all the data about this second murder incident and how it all fits together. A killer uses a yellow suit to kill 5 kids within the FNAF 2 facility. The day guard, who is hunted by the robots on night shift, who clearly has a criminal past, tries to stop the killer, deactivates Freddy, but inevitably the killer gets away. All of this is clearly caught on CCTV, and so when company attempts to try and cover up the next day, but are unable to, as the police investigation stops them from doing so, we find that they used the CCTV footage involved to implicate the day guard as the killer is not caught, and fearing retribution for a second mass murder on their property, the company throws the guard under the bus. He takes the fall for the killings, potentially having a previous criminal record, as we know that the robots attempted to attack him, so therefore they have reasonable evidence to convict him instead. We know that the site would eventually reopen in November, the gameplay to take place, as seen in the grand reopening loading screen. A notable detail is the addition of Balloon Boy to the site. We see in the mini-games that he is not present during the time of the murders on the map. It is possible he has been added to be inviting to draw customers in following the recent events that occurred. This would explain why he continuously says hi in the game, as well as the fact that his positioning in the facility implies that he is in some way potentially close to the main doors, as logically, as he is opposite from the prize counter, where the businesses usually put prize counters or gift shops next to the entrance/exit. So therefore BB was clearly meant to be some kind of lure to draw in new customers. And so we come to Jeremy Fitzgerald, who takes the night shift job for the grand reopening, as we see from the wanted ad and teasers. Oddly, we never get any indication of Jeremy's fate after his final night in this game. His payslip is seen on night 6 next to a newspaper, which reveals the site is closing after a few short weeks, and that the toy animatronics are being scrapped. The Wizards will be refurbished for use in a smaller setting, which is most likely the FNAF 1 site. And so, as far as we can tell, Jeremy potentially continued working for the company, just in a different site. Jeremy is replaced the night after this by Fritz Smith, who is immediately fired after one night for tampering with the suits. It would appear that Fritz is, in this case, merely a thrill seeker wanting to mess around. We never get a conclusive answer, however, on Jeremy, yet the fact Phone Guy intended to take the night shift after the second guard raises the possibility that he could indeed actually be Jeremy. This would make sense, as potentially Jeremy's shift ended. Fritz was hired as his replacement, which Phone Guy was going to do until found a replacement, and then Fritz got fired after one day, which would again force Jeremy to retake the position if needed. The fact that the animatronics come for Jeremy also seems to clue us into this idea, as we only have two other characters that we know for a fact the animatronics would attack, which were Mike and the phone guy following this point in the timeline. This game also introduces us to a major player in the franchise, the puppet. Phone guy notes that it's disturbing, implying its origins are far older than this Freddy's establishment. We see the puppet's death in the Save Them minigame, where the pink figure kills a lone child outside a site where Freddy is seen giving cake to kids. As the FNAF 2 suits are being noted as just now being allowed to walk around in the day, this does seem weird, as the Freddy is either a person in a costume or predates a previous ban on the day roaming, which, if they were banned for sanitation threats, would make sense. So, some fun side notes. So, a summary of the events of the first two games. A crying child is murdered outside of a Freddy's establishment, and it is implied they become the puppet. Fredbear's Family Diner is also an establishment at some point, which is closed, and the original owner leaves the company by the 26th of June of an unknown year. 5 kids are murdered by a mascot-wearing individual in a Freddy's establishment. This leads to bad reputation, and the puppet hides the bodies within the suits, leading to sanitation threats which cause them to be banned from roaming in the day. The site is eventually forced to close after a year-long search for buyers. In 1987, during the summer, the company attempts to relaunch a new site with upgraded tech, allowing day roaming for the suits again. One weekend, however, a second massacre of 5 children occurs by an individual wearing a yellow suit, and the day guard is implicated and presumably takes the blame. The company tries to downplay the event. By November, the site reopens, and Jeremy Fitzgerald takes the night shift until the site is noted to be closing and the animatronics are being scrapped. An individual named Fritz Smith takes the job for one day before being fired. During the year of 1987, the Bite of 87 occurs, which leads to the suits being banned from walking during the day again. Some point after this, Phone Guy dies recording his FNAF 1 tapes. This occurs on the FNAF 1 site, which opens at some point after the closure of the FNAF 2 site. Also, the first potential suit stuffing of an individual appears to occur prior to Phone Guy's death. By what we can presume to be November 1993, Mike Schmidt takes the night job at Freddy's until he is fired after only 1 week of the job. So that is the lore for the first two games. Stay tuned for part 3, where we will be diving into what is considered one of the most disappointing installments in the franchise, FNAF 3.